Today, I'm the moderator of this event. My name is Ebru Omar, and I'm a member of ICOMOS Turkey and ISG 20th Century. I also teach at Restoration Department in Yıldız Technical University and Bilgi University in Istanbul, Turkey. The webinar is titled as Improvisation and Planning in Architectural Conservation, Teaching and Learning. Experiences of online versus face-to-face so far. The event is organized by the CIF, the International Training Committee of ICOMOS and ICOMOS Turkey National Committee. During the COVID-19 pandemic, which caused a halt to life almost all over the world, the efforts towards the general objective of providing knowledge, experience, and sensitivity regarding cultural assets are also naturally disrupted. The question of how the educational process of cultural heritage can be maintained under pandemic conditions constitutes an issue crucial for discussion by the experts of this field. In this context, ICOMOS Turkey National Committee and ICOMOS CIF developed a joint initiative about the possibilities and constraints of implementing conservation education programs during and after the pandemics. Within the experience of online versus face-to-face education team, the webinar is held on the rapid shift to online education for cultural heritage and conservation, pros and cons, theory and practice issues, problems for attendants and educators, and changes in the expected outputs. Today, we have 5 distinguished experts in the field of conservation education: Claudine Deom, Claudio Varagnoli, hopefully Donatus Camamba, Cristina Gonzalez Longo, and by Ravi Kanil. Before starting the event for the audience, I would kindly ask you to switch off your videos and mute your microphones during the presentations. Of course, comments could be added or questions can be asked via chat box. You can write it in the chat box. So we will collect them during the presentations and discuss them at the very end of the webinar. Therefore, I also would kindly ask to our presenters to limit their time with 15 minutes, so we have enough time for discussions, questions, and answers. And I would like to introduce our first speaker, Claudine Deom. Claudine Deom is an associated professor at Université de Montréal School of Architecture, where she also heads the master's program in conservation of the built heritage. She is currently pursuing research in heritage conservation with a focus on the process of attributing heritage values, especially to public buildings in Montreal and Quebec. Her title is Revisiting Heritage Conservation Education. So the floor is yours, Claudine. You are muted. Okay.
Apologies. There we go. Take 2. Can everybody see my my presentation, the slides?
Yes, I hope it's okay for everybody. If there's a problem, you can write it on the chat box.
Okay. So here I go. Hello, everyone. Et mes salutations montréalaises à la communauté francophone de l'ICOMOS, en espérant que certains d'entre vous se sont joints à nous ce matin pour Montréal. I'm very pleased and honored to take part in this webinar. And thank you, ICOMOS International, for hosting this series of discussions. And also my thanks go to the organizers, Ebru, for your introduction and planning, Nurdan as well, and of course, Christina. Thank you, ladies, for all your efforts invested in putting this event together. As Ebru has mentioned, I'm a professor of heritage conservation I teach at the School of Architecture in the Faculty of Environmental Design at Université de Montréal in Canada. I teach conservation in 2 programs. Supposed to be switching, there we go. I teach conservation in 2 programs. Firstly, a master's, an MSc in heritage conservation, which is intended mostly for students who have just finished an undergraduate degree. Those who sign up usually have a background in urbanism, art history, and sometimes a few architects do join us. And after they graduate, most find employment in heritage departments at different governmental levels or act as consultants in private firms. I also teach in the program, the master's program, the professional master's in architecture. Their heritage is offered as an optional stream because in Canada, heritage is not a mandatory component of architectural education. Students can go through 5 years of university courses without having even been introduced to heritage. Therefore, this stream, which takes up approximately 1/3 of their course credit to obtain their diploma, can only be considered in truth as an introduction. I have to say that I'm quite thrilled that a discussion about heritage education can take place at the international level, because as Ebru has mentioned earlier, we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc on the education sector at all levels, and definitely in colleges and universities. There is much to talk about because the switch to online teaching presents its share of challenges even after a few months. And I will leave my colleagues to address these issues in their presentations, and I look forward to that. As for my presentation, I wish to focus on the content of heritage conservation courses and programs. Because in my opinion, the past few months make for an auspicious time to reflect upon goals that we pursue in our courses and programs. And to be fair, reviewing contents is something that we do regularly in academia in response to research, and of course in response to the evolution of theory and practice. And I would venture indeed that over the course of the past 10 years or so, heritage education has considerably evolved to include concerns that we are discussing at the international level, such as the importance of human values, democracy in heritage, sustainability, of course, and the climate crisis. But the pandemic has created a context that, in my view, or at least where I am presently in Canada, a context that directly concerns our heritage. I'm referring, for one, to the necessary adaptation of our built environment to provide public health safety measures. While some changes can be viewed as positive, and you can see a few examples on this slide, such as the increase of public space dedicated to bike paths or pedestrian lanes, or even to allow for terraces, restaurant terraces to welcome more patrons, these changes can be viewed as being positive. But others might seriously harm our heritage buildings, especially those that do not possess the required characteristics to ensure that these measures are indeed implemented. As an example, this here is a slide showing an article, or the main picture of an article published last week in a Montreal newspaper, which reports on the potential threat posed by older schools without mechanical ventilation. Now, as most of us know, adapting heritage buildings in order to meet contemporary building codes requirements is already a challenging task. Will we be able to successfully adapt to these new standards, these buildings, without compromising their value? Will we bother or even care in view of the urgency of public health issues? The second, and just as important, issue raised by the pandemic is the economic recovery in a post-COVID era. After spending huge sums of money to counter the negative impact of the virus, governments now are devising plans to restart their economy. In Canada and in Quebec, it is expected that investments in infrastructure will be a part of the solutions proposed. These will include the construction of new public buildings. But what can we expect for our heritage buildings? Will the call for investment in heritage places be heard, such as the one launched and spearheaded by the National Trust for Canada and several NGOs in heritage? Will this call for shovel-ready projects in heritage be heard, or will our heritage places be viewed as quote unquote in the way, or even superfluous, just as it is the case for this modern church, for instance, which is slated for demolition by no other than the Quebec government to make way for a new home for senior citizens. And of course, the issue of recovery does not pertain exclusively to heritage buildings, but also to the urban fabric, whose variety of uses often defines the quality and the vitality of neighborhoods and their communities. This study undertaken in the US a few years back demonstrates the important economic role commercial heritage buildings can play in view of their intrinsic heritage qualities or their architectural qualities, such as their proximity to one another and to the residential fabric, as well as their reduced surface area, which is favorable for businesses to start up. As many are now vacant due to COVID, as shown here on a Montreal street, will policy recognize their full potential? So indeed, the COVID pandemic has brought on many uncertainties. But nevertheless, I can't help but think that however uncertain and trying these times are, and they certainly are, we're going through a period that provides us with an unequaled opportunity for changing perceptions about the role of heritage in society, and therefore reinforcing what we had already started before COVID, that is to promote heritage conservation as a strong lever for sustainable development. In short, I have to say, I don't think that going back to business as usual is an opportunity anymore. And it will be, in most part, the responsibility of the upcoming generation of heritage professionals to take on that challenge. Hence the importance to reflect upon how to best prepare them for this future role. How to best prepare them is a daunting question to answer because heritage conservation education is, as we know, very diverse. For some, it's about material conservation or collections, while for others, courses and programs focus on the intangible or on world heritage, and these are only but a few examples to illustrate this diversity of programs and courses in conservation. In addition, the association of heritage to sustainability only adds to the required knowledge. It seems that graduate students need to be proficient in economics, sociology, anthropology, on top of the specific knowledge developed by the field over the years, such as theory and policy. Now, to try to see clear to how to best prepare students at the University of Montreal, we've begun the review of some courses in heritage to adapt them according to key sustainability competencies, and they're shown here. I'm more than happy to share the complete reference to this article when my presentation is over. On the one hand, I can appreciate that defining competencies in courses in general and in heritage in particular is nothing new. Typical competencies most master's programs strive to provide include, for instance, the ability for critical thinking and the ability to communicate efficiently. Sustainability competencies, on the other hand, have been the topic of an increasing number of studies and publications in the field of education science and of sustainability since, I would say, approximately the mid-2000s. They reflect the development of academic programs worldwide in sustainability. As opposed to more quote unquote traditional competencies, these focus on sustainable development. They were not designed to address one discipline in particular, nor do they claim to be a one-size-fits-all recipe for sustainability. Rather, they can act as a lens to look through a body of knowledge and skills, for instance, in heritage conservation, and this helps to decide how to best assemble a content and craft evaluations. These sustainability competencies need to be adapted, of course, to the context of a course, as well as to the level of knowledge, and even, I would say, of maturity to the students involved. As an example, in the master's program, in the stream I was referring to at the beginning of my presentation within the master's program of architecture, we have prepared a studio in design of contemporary architecture in a World Heritage setting. The 2018 edition focused on Old and New Town Edinburgh, and the 2019 edition on Old Town Quebec City. This one semester studio was a preparatory course for the students for their final thesis project. Half of the semester was dedicated to the understanding of the World Heritage Site. Its history, yes, of course, but more importantly, the emphasis was put on the contemporary aspects of the World Heritage Sites. For instance, what are the economic drivers? Tourism, as we can suspect, of course, but what else? Who lives there? What are the age groups? How does the World Heritage City connect with its surroundings via transportation modes, for instance? The research conducted in teams produced a compilation in the form of a collective atlas containing descriptions and maps, but also proposing analyses and conclusions from the findings. And what you're seeing here is an excerpt of that atlas. The atlas then served as a reference book to design their final project, for which every student had to propose a site within the World Heritage City and a project. This endeavor aimed to touch on two principles sustainability competencies. And here I'm showing back the competencies to complete my presentation. So the first competency was number one on the list, the systems thinking competence. By investing topics unknown to them, such as economic growth, such as residential conditions in neighborhoods, and even homelessness, students were developing the ability to couple facts, to see how they relate to each other, and eventually how they could inform and determine a new use introduced in the World Heritage Site through the building they were to design. The second sustainability competence this learning process aimed is number 4 on the list, strategic competence. These future architects were invited to imagine their contemporary intervention as a positive contribution to the functioning of the World Heritage Site as a whole. Maintaining the OUV, enhancing the OUV, the outstanding universal value, not only with visual strategies such as height of the building or materials, etc., but more importantly with the developed program that they were asked to imagine on a long span of time. Individually, this was done, each student at a time, but I think that a future exercise would be interesting to try to see how that same question could be answered, taking into account the whole series of projects and seeing how the impact of new architectural projects, plural, could be evaluated in the World Heritage Site. As I think my time is running out, I will close by saying a few things about sustainability competencies. I think that for me, they have allowed me to question and improve some of the content of courses and evaluations I was already using in courses in heritage. They helped me to articulate new questions to ask the students and challenge them to think about their contribution as professionals in the long term. And finally, I believe that these competencies can, in general, enhance the role courses and programs in heritage already play in the field, i.e. providing students the abilities required to guide our heritage through a healthy balance between preservation and change and support sustainability. So with that, I will leave you, and thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Claudine, for your presentation. Yes, to discuss about the changing roles and concepts like sustainability is really important. And I think, as I mentioned before, in the questions and answers part, questions addressed to Claudine Deom, they can be added to the chat box now, and we will discuss about it at the end of all presentations. Thank you again. And I am moving to the second speaker, Claudio Varagnoli. Claudio Varagnoli is a full professor of architectural conservation at the University of Chieti-Pescara in Italy since 2001. He is a member of the Italian Superior Council of Cultural Heritage and president of the Technical Scientific Committee for Contemporary Art and Architecture at the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage. He has published and lectured widely on conservation and history of architecture, and has actively worked on the preservation and conservation of 20th century architecture. And the title is Teaching to Preserve the 20th Century Architecture, Online and Face-to-Face Experiences, Challenges and Opportunities. So please.
I don't, if it's, is it visible, my presentation now?
I can't see it.
Oh, sorry, just have a problem. Touch the screen, sorry.
Now it's
now.
Yeah, now
it's okay.
Yes, it's okay. We can see it.
Let's make full screen, Claudio.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
So many thanks to the organizers of this webinar, to Norman, to Ebru, and to Christine for inviting to this webinar, so interesting for all of us. My university of Chieti-Pescara is located in Abruzzo region, with idea where I'm from, which is in the center of Italy, on the Adriatic coast. It's a state university of about 25,000 students, housed in two nearby cities, precisely Chieti and Pescara, about 200 kilometers from Rome. The students come largely from the southern and central regions of Italy, and they have a basic education oriented towards project and design. Just to give you an idea of the context, the conservation courses are mandatory with within the undergraduate degree of architecture and offered in the last 3 years of the 5 years program of architecture. The courses are very popular within the students, and many students focus their final project allow the choice of a specific discipline. Italy, as you know, was hit hard by COVID-19 right in the initial phase. The country was quarantined in lockdown for 2 months from the 9th of March. On the 16th of March, the government started the phase 2 and lifted some restrictions, such as social isolation, regional movement. Traveling between regions was granted from the 3rd of June of the same year, with a further relaxation of the restrictions. University have suspended face-to-face lessons since the beginning of March, with different dates according to the regions. And this provision obviously caused inconveniences in many departments, but even more in architecture, where there are studio-based teaching and a series of workshops with direct and close contacts between teachers and students. The lecture-based architectural conservation courses took place in the first semester, and thereafter were not affected by the problems caused by the pandemic. However, the undergraduate seminars for undergraduates taking place through the year were fully delivered online. Normally in our universities, as many all Italian universities, the final degree thesis in architectural conservation require a rather in-depth study of an historic building. It starts from the principles that the conservation project is rooted in the characteristic of the building and its context. There are therefore no a priori theories that need to be applied. Students are required to make a measured survey with traditional or new technological methods of their choice, supervised by the academic staff. Like in this case, this is a villa from 19th and 20th century near Naples. The survey is considered a fundamental element for understanding the structural, material, and typological feature of the building, but also for understanding its evolution over time. Then follow the analysis of the state of conservation and the list of critical aspects of the building, also in consideration of its relationships with the context. Final stage is the project. This is another case of 20th century building in the south of Italy at different scales, which often involves the use of contemporary architecture and materials, like in this case, the Cathedral of Teramo, always in the Abruzzo region. Students choose topics based on some thematic areas decided by academic staff as follows: vernacular architecture and small historic centers, 20th century architecture and industrial archaeology, buildings in ruins and archaeological areas. Architectural production from the 20th century is a problematic subject for the usual methods of conservation, born mainly to conserve the future, for the future, the archaeological remains or medieval ruins or architectural and artistic complex. But the architecture of the 20th century, on the other hand, represents a moment of rupture for various reasons. The use of new materials, the innovative concept of space and functions, the almost total absence of decoration. This is the case of the stadium, the football stadium in Pescara from 1955. And also the different economic and social relationship in architecture. Many works from this period were buildings related to radical political and social experiments, such as during the dictatorship of the 20th century in Italy. We have many. Hence a sequence of destructions, even violent ones, of demolitions, of transformation, of simple adaptation to new condition of use that don't correspond to the intrinsic value of the I show you this case because it was designed a new, completely new stadium in Pescara with a modern architecture without any relationships with this interesting structure. The structure damaged because of the decay of the concrete. And this is a study of us, one of our students for the preservation stadium, sorry. And this is another case, a theater and monument, an obelisk dedicated to the poet Gabriele D'Annunzio, who was born in the city, with a study of the decay the concrete of the great obelisk. But the 20th century architecture didn't only produce monuments, but also more modest buildings, but representative of a specific historic period. This is the case, for example, of Pescara, the city where I'm speaking from, that has few monuments and buildings prior to 19th century and doesn't have a real historic center. And so our thesis topics try to make students understand the stratification of and the history of the 20th century buildings and their value today. A study, for example, about urban fabric from 30s and 40s in Pescara. The students carried out the surveys in abandoned or underused building, and largely before the quarantine began. Afterwards, it was necessary to base the required analysis of the building on existing findings or documentation available. We were lucky because most of the documentation was provided by the building owner who have recently rearranged the archive. So like in this case, municipal depot in Rome. The students require a close academic supervision during this analytic phase. The lockdown has resulted in an even more careful consideration of the archive material and a greater understanding of the construction, even in its structural and material aspects. In fact, archival documents often allow us to understand constructive and typological details that are not visible. For us, the information in the archives is similar to the information that archaeologists deduce from the excavation, but without altering the building. The supervisions meetings with the undergraduates took place online. There were no major problems in communication. I must say that the interaction between teacher and students were perhaps more intense, thanks to the continuous exchange of photos, drawings, or written text. I show you three works at different stages of development. The first is a work on the tram depot on the municipality of Rome, built in 1928. It's a disused building, but not abandoned, because it was used as a market. It's a vast complex of interest for its reinforced structure, dating 1928. And it follows in the exterior, the traditional style, the classical style of Rome. It's located near a district following this style, but the interior is very interesting for this structure in concrete. And here you have the understanding of the decay of the structure. It's interesting because now the building is now located at a lower altitude than the surrounding buildings, because the larger residential buildings were built on backfill, so it can be used for the new purposes for the inhabitants. You have the study of the structure on the materials, and the project studies the possibility of reusing this building for services for the neighborhood, market, greenhouse, garden, taking advantage of the considerable height inside of the building. New functions are housed, trying to preserve the building as much as possible, of course, and they are largely in steel to distinguish itself from the original one. As you can see, I think it's interesting the use of this new structure inside the original building. And another case, it's another bus shed of the municipality of Rome, partly demolished to make place for another modern building. It was completed in 1937. You can see in the back the new building, which is really hardly inserted in the ancient building. Thanks to the documentation made available by the building owner, the student was able to get a complete picture of the history of the building. And you can see the current situation inside, archival documentation, very interesting to us. And the first phase of the survey, this work is still in progress. And the last case is concerns the city of Lecce. It has been just started. An ancient hospital for treatment of lung diseases. So it's very interesting to us. It's located in the center of the city, and we are studying the project in order to study the possibility to reuse for the treatment of all the people after or during the lockdown. Maybe in the future we hope not to need, but it's interesting for us because also it's located in the center of the city in a large park, very used by the people. So thank you. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudio. This was an interesting example. We moved from the theory to the practice, and working with 20th century buildings has its pros somehow, I think. Concentration on documents and archive work was the center of the project, and maybe we will discuss it afterwards. And thank you again for this interesting presentation. Now, I would like to introduce Cristina Gonzalez Longo. Dr. Longo is a RIBA specialist conservation architect and director and founder of the Master of Science in Architectural Design for the Conservation of Built Heritage and the Architectural Design and Conservation Research Unit, Department of Architecture, University of Strathclyde. She is also the president of ICOMOS CIF, the International Training Committee. And she was the main organizer of this event. Thank you again for your efforts, and the floor is yours.
Hello, I hope you can all hear me okay?
Yes.
And see my screen as well, yes?
Yes, your presentation is there.
Okay. Hello everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. It's the first time we do a webinar in CIF, so it's quite exciting, and I'm very pleased to see so many people attending. So the scope of this presentation is just to show a bit of my own personal experience during this lockdown, just being really at the front line because we were caught in just starting a project. So just also give you a bit of background. I study conservation in Rome in the Scuola di Specializzazione in Restauro dei Monumenti, which was really an experience for life and mark all the rest of my life really. It's a school that is 3 years, 2 years plus the thesis, and it's really thorough, and it's a really historic course in itself. So I was really privileged to be able to have such a great teachers, and also made me a lot to think about. I was working before I studied in Madrid in a very good school as well, technical university at SAM, but we were oriented to the new. So then I finished, I went to work, and I found out I was doing work in existing buildings, of which I didn't know much about. So I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to do this course in Rome, and there, you know, I was really fully exposed for a long time to architecture. And this building, Santa Francesca Romana, and built on the Temple of Venus and Rome, became really a central part of my research. And this building has been fully occupied, continuously occupied by the monks for 700 years. So really allows you to think about what happens over time in a place and when design is acted in a building. And then I went to work as an architect, so I have over 20 years experience as practicing architect. I'm still running my own office when I have the time. And this is the very first project. Just after I finished in Rome, I won a competition. These good old times, and probably young people listening to this, they will not find the same opportunities that I was lucky to have. And this is a very interesting 12th century building in Spain. And I just show you this just to show how complex even a small building can be. And the amount of things you have to really look at it. I was really fully exposed there to, from archaeologists to materials, conservators. So as I say, I have over 20 years experience working with historic buildings, also doing new buildings. And I work also in Queensberry House in the new part of the new Scottish Parliament building. And this was even more about the transformation of the place. It's a World Heritage Site, so it has a lot of controversy as well. And I show you these images of the interior of the building because for me encapsulates what I really think doing conservation and reusing buildings should be, and it's about not canceling the memories. You see here in the right-hand side, the remaining, this kind of imprint of the old balustrade, and the new one, in accordance to current regulations, stairs. These stairs are fire escape, so they are completely are compliant with current regulations. But this is a 17th century stair. Was a lot of fight behind doing that, which I will not cover in this occasion. But I think we have is a kind of responsibility as well when you work with historic buildings. Many people will say that the building itself is a client as well as the client that you have for the buildings, because you have to really think these buildings last longer, stay for longer than you, your clients, and anyone around you. So you have to think about that. So it's something I've been reflecting on, stratigraphic design, and of course from Carlo Scarpa, that is also a big inspiration of how he did his things in Castelvecchio in particular. So new and old exposed, living together in harmony and being contemporary. So I think that's very important. So respecting the old, but also thinking as today, and also considering the future generations. So my work and my research and my teaching is all about conservation of built heritage, design oriented, I say by design. So I was lucky 7 years ago to create this new program at the University of Strathclyde. I was before just part-time teaching, but was this opportunity and I jumped into it because I thought, it's what I wanted to do. I have seen sufficient, I thought, practice, and now I want to act on it and try to make my contribution for other generations as well. So it's all what is the intersection between architectural conservation and architectural design, and is practice informed teaching, teaching informed practice. So the course is fully recognized by the Institute of Historic Buildings Conservation. And if you didn't have the opportunity to have a look, I will suggest, because they are really up to date and it's always in the current what is going on at all levels, including jobs for those listening. And the course is also based on the ICOMOS education and training guidelines. And this, that's why I'm very honored really to be the president now of ICOMOS CIF, because these criteria are the ones that are used for accreditation of architects in conservation and in courses. So it's quite important. So I think we need to really put our time on making all this the best we can. as I say, the course is design-oriented, research-based, and we try to give a theoretical and practical education. And I cannot say enough about the teaching team I have of 30 people contributing. I'm the only full-time member of staff teaching in the course. I have lecturers, external experts on every expertise of material or type of building, or all the things that involve conservation. And we have had some internal funding also with Historic Environment Scotland, which is the body in Scotland that looks after historic buildings and heritage. And they have been really helpful in giving funding for students to develop research. And we try to look also, I think, always at things where it's needed, where maybe there is less focus on looking at things like roofs that seem to be forgotten because they are hidden. And we have, first of all, to try to map things, because as you know, the first way that you can conserve buildings is by knowing what you have. So inventories, catalogs, and that's why it's called listing buildings, because it was a list actually. So first you need to know what you have and then act on it. And we created a database that put together all the information about buildings. Because of course I'm an architect and my course is mainly oriented to architects or engineers, but for us it's very important to integrate, as you know, and I'm very keen in also in CIF to really integrate everyone. And I think it's needed more professional and cultural exchange between the different training that we receive, different education, different experiences. That's, I think, the richness of our field. But we also do things like housing, high-rise housing in Kuala Lumpur. I have a student that was my student in Edinburgh before and came to Strathclyde to do a PhD. He got the funding from the Commonwealth. This has been extremely interesting because how the research started is looking at the beautiful vernacular in Malaysia, these timber buildings that have incredible sophisticated ventilation strategies, and thinking how, you know, buildings that over centuries were adapting to the climate, how we can do that with modern construction. So it was really interesting work. So the students get exposed to all sort of, from survey to study of materials and the structures as well. And we have really great contributors, from Matthew Petricru from WSP and Alberto Viscovich from Rome, from also the Chieti Pescara University, like Claudio actually. And they have really great contributors to the course, and we make the students to think it's not just looking at the building, you have to look at the surroundings, like in this case in a mausoleum where the problem is actually downstairs. So the lockdown happened as the students were just starting their project, and was the conservation and conversion of the former cattle market in Glasgow. And we are in partnership with Glasgow City Council for a few years now, and has been as a success story, a building we did with them 2 years ago. Now they are doing it as converting in a school. So really, really good collaboration. And this was something very useful because the students that were just starting doing the surveys, and they were very helpful opening all the buildings for us, giving the information, but then we have to stop and go home. And thankfully the students have enough material to work on. I keep saying the surveys have to be checked because they were only 2 or 3 times in the site. So they were only able to take limited information, but they were able to do that. And because this is getting recorded, you will be able to go back and look at this link. So I'm conscious about the time, so I want to rush it a bit. And I want to show you this, if it works. Just a very short. I'm going to, okay. I think I need to stop sharing and share it again. Sorry about this. I think it's the video. Bringing another screen. Yeah. So I just wanted to show that short video that you can see. Oh, it's coming again. You can go it's in YouTube actually, and it's just to show you the resilience of the students, because this is a student that had to go back to India during the lockdown, and she has electricity cuts and many difficulties. I ended up doing a video for the project that is something we never had. So that was a completely new thing in the course. We still with the same, so the lockdown, we didn't want to affect the quality, and we wanted the students to keep thinking about the same issues. As Claudio said, I think they look more actually to the archive material, and they focus more in the materials because this is what they had instead of the building. But I think it's a way, I think made us to think a lot how we could transform the methods we were using. And we do surveys outside, but we were already bringing some of the equipment to the classroom, or even materials. And I think it's the kind of things we have to think now going forward. And this first semester is going to be initially delivery online. And also think the issues of the climate change. And as you know, all the retrofitting, they are saying, but I try to combat a bit that word because I think it's a bit misleading. People have to focus really more in analyze and understand the existing fabric. When people talk about reusing, retrofitting, straight away they are looking for systems to add to the building. Why? When you have buildings that maybe can cope very well with energy, maybe with a very little adjustment without really doing major things. So you have to understand how the buildings are built, where it's located. And so we have to improve this energy efficiency, but without compromising, of course, the architectural significance. And that's design. This is what is design. Historical England has done a fantastic work in this Heritage Count series to actually show value as well. And I think something we have to also give more to the students, that they can make the case, because we are very much advocates. I think we need to lobby more. We need to tell governments, authorities, how important is heritage at all levels for the well-being, for the health, and for the economy as well. And aligning the sustainable design principles. And I think we need to clarify also wording, because I think it's restoration, reconstruction issues, but really we want to do conservation. We want to preserve buildings and to reuse them. I'm going to go quickly because I'm conscious about the design. The slides will stay, so you can go back and read. So what actions I think needs to be done? I think it's more research is much needed. We need upskill professionals. We need to transform surveying assessment practices, empower and educate building owners, very important. Rethink asset management methods, create new funding procurement models, and educate and involve communities. For me, these are really the key actions to improve things. There are lots of opportunities now for students to work on the existing buildings, but they have to really get trained. They need more historical critical training. It's not just about techniques. Sometimes students come thinking that you are going to teach them just a list of techniques to use in buildings. And when they discover you put them to read theory, they get a bit sometimes, but it's fundamental, is the basis of everything. So historic places, people, we use some new technologies, collaboration, and we have the students sitting in the table is attending today, pleased to See, the students' peer learning is the one that is worrying me more for starting off the course, which is online, because it's fundamental, as you know, that the students, they learn between them as much as I think they learn from us. And training grants, Historical Environment Scholar has been giving grants for students attending practical. And this is the thing that we cannot do online. So we have to really move things around so that the students can have the experience of this practical direct smell of the materials as well. Students in their own testimonials that they talk about the course that you can read online, they talk about employability and the significance of research. And I think these are the two critical areas. We have to give the students the resilience that they have actually demonstrated during the lockdown. But we have to work more on that and giving them a variety of skills and being advocates of not only learning a specific aspect, but also being able to make a case, which is, I think, important in general, and the significance of research. No, we don't teach, I think, enough in undergraduate this aspect, and I think that comes important in the course. We have these challenges ahead of how we do practical training and site visits, but the second webinar is going to deal with that, so we will leave it for then. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Christina, for this inspiring presentation. Your conclusion says a lot and had to be discussed more intensely. Maybe it's a chance for a new perception for the cultural heritage, and we will talk about it later. I would like to say again that if you have questions to Christina, Claudio, or Claudine, you can put it on the chat box. So afterwards we will discuss them all together. So now I would like to introduce you by Ravi Kanil. She's an architect from India. And a Master of Science student in Architectural Design for the Conservation of Built Heritage, University of Strathclyde. She will have a talk about a master's student's perspective. So the floor is yours, Paravi.
Hi, I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes. And your
Can you all see my screen?
It's okay, yes. We can see it.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bhairavi Prasad. I'm doing my master's in architectural design for the conservation of built heritage in the University of Strathclyde. And Christina, the previous speaker, is my course director. I would like to thank Christina and ICOMOS for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and it is truly a pleasure to share the floor with such esteemed speakers. I will be talking about my experience as a student from my perspective, about the shift from face-to-face learning to online learning. I would like to say that I got this unique experience of unique opportunity of experiencing the best of both worlds, which is face-to-face and online. So most of the online learning that we had to do was in the second semester, and it started since March. That was the onset of COVID-19, and that was when the lockdown was introduced. We had two major modules to complete, which was the conservation design project, which was of 40 credits, and the dissertation project, which was of 60 credits. The conservation design project was the conservation of former cattle market in Glasgow. We did it in collaboration with the Glasgow City Council. And the dissertation was, of course, an individual project. And I personally based my dissertation based on the conservation project. So before the onset of COVID, we did get an opportunity to complete a few things, which included site visits. We visited the site about 3 times. We already visited libraries, including the University of Strathclyde, Andersonian Library, and the Mitchell Library in Glasgow for archives and materials. And we met as a group with our class peers to make our presentations in the preliminary studies about the conservation project, the site. So the timeline was such that we had finished the basics or the basic presentations to help us move with our individual proposals of the project. So before the COVID-19 lockdown was introduced, we had already done a basic study of the archival research, the historic research. We had measured drawings and we had a lot of photographs of the site, and we had already done the condition mapping. And one of the things that Christina, my course director, suggested us to do was that we had to make all of these, collect all of these information and save it as a repository, digital repository, and all the peers in the class could access that repository at any time. This step that we did actually helped us a lot, and it was absolutely helpful for us to further our project into individual proposals. Each of us had to make our own proposal for the site. So after the COVID lockdown was introduced, we had to present our briefs and our design development online via Zoom sessions. And we used to discuss and make corrections with Christina in individual sessions. And the review of our design project happened via Zoom. We had to present it to the Glasgow City Council, and we had also to present it to the exam board via Zoom. And the results were published in My Place. My Place is a personal profile given to each student by the university, where the student can check their results and their upcoming classes. All their information about the university will be there. So after this, we also had to do our dissertation, which started with introduction to our supervisors. Christina introduced us to our supervisors via Zoom. We had online classes and sessions to recap what we had learned in the first semester. We also had individual Zoom sessions with our supervisor to discuss about the progress of the dissertation. And finally, we had to submit our dissertation in My Place, which we have all done, and we're all eagerly waiting for our results. I have to say that I didn't meet the supervisor even once physically, but I've already known him, Dr. Miles, through online communication. So there were a few things that did not change even if we had shifted our learning through online. One thing was that we already and always made submissions through My Place. There was no physical submission. So the marking and releasing of results would be online, always. The second thing was that the assessment and reviews, all of them remained, and we stuck to the schedule. We didn't have to move around a lot. And the third thing is that the learning outcomes of each module did not change. We stuck to the course and the schedule that was already proposed to us in the beginning of the year. However, there were a few things that actually changed, and one of them is how we accessed our sources and materials as our reading of books and archives. I would really like to commend my university for giving us access to new online resources. After the pandemic started, we had access to more books online, and that really helped us. and also the digital repositories that I mentioned earlier. It was really, really helpful. The second thing that changed was from face-to-face classes, so physically being in a venue, to the classes via Zoom. The third one was reviews via Zoom sessions. In my course, one of the advantages is that we didn't have written examinations. So that was a good thing. So we had to do the reviews and presentations via Zoom sessions. Even though we actually kept the schedule, we did not deviate too much. There were a few challenges that we faced. We could not go back to the site. Although we had gone there twice, we could not go back to the site and experience the site. However, we had sessions with Matthew, the structural engineer, and Ali, who showed us pictures of the site, close-up images of the decay of the building, and it really gave us an insight. And they explained their insights. They gave us insights about the decay of the material, the structural stability of the sheds in the site. So we got to learn even if we didn't go to the site. The second thing is that one of my classmates, as Christina already told, she went back to India and she didn't have proper internet connection. So she was not able to attend all the classes, but she still joined us in classes and reviews, and she gave us an excellent presentation. The third one is that we were not able to go back to our libraries and archives to just check if we had missed something, or the hand-drawn sketches or drawings of the building to see if we had missed something. However, most of these disadvantages were covered by the advantages of the online classes. One of the things is that we had closer look at the notes since it was like online presentations and reviews were conducted. We had the notes projected on our personal screens. This helped us to focus better, and there were not too much distractions in a physical that would be there in a physical environment. It was just us and the laptop screens. The third one is that it saved a lot of time, and it gave us a flexibility in time, because there was no need for us to assemble or physically travel to a place. We had to just, our laptops gave us reminders and we just went into the Zoom sessions. The fourth thing is that it was very sustainable, because it saves energy in travel, and it is attended from one of the most comfortable situations, which is at home. And it was very convenient for us to join. And one of the major things that was very advantageous is that we could record a few classes and we could revisit them. So even if one of us missed a class because of technical issues, this covered that they could revisit the class and see what was, or what they missed and what they could learn. In conclusion, I would like to say that it was truly a pleasure to experience both of these worlds, and we had no difficulties with transitioning into the online zone of learning. However, I think digitizing of resources like older books and many manual catalogs of archives would help us, and giving the access to students would really help us moving forward in such situations. With site visits, I would like to say that although we had an opportunity to go to the site, what really stuck personally in my mind is the various pictures and photographs that we took. The site survey was thorough, and as I told you before, the classes giving us insight into the material decay. All these things were really thorough, and that stick to me when I was giving the proposal for the project. The third thing is that after the lockdown, we really didn't get to meet our peers, but we did organize our own group chats to understand the project and try to find out how we can move forward as a class in doing this project without meeting face to face. So I would like to encourage more of these peers classroom chat to mimic physical group work. This would really help us. And I think while we talk about distance learning, I think it's also better to ensure that all the students have the internet connection and laptop services. Thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ravi. It was really interesting and important to hear your opinion from the eye of a master's student. And everybody, as I could see from the chat box, everybody was very pleased to hear your opinions and your pros and cons about this period. And unfortunately, Donatus, Donatus Kamamba could not attend the conference webinar. So it's time for questions and answers. I would like to ask Nurdan kindly to read the questions which are in the chat box.
Just coming, trying to organize the questions. Here I am.
Yeah, there are a few questions.
Yeah, and I also received some questions in private, so I will be asking them in order of appearance. Unfortunately, the first question was actually my question. The question was directed to Claudine Deon. Thank you very much for the influential presentation. How do you consider the possibility of providing these competencies during the pandemic? Did you experience any methods to implement such a program during the pandemic? Actually, this is connected to the next question. If you like, I will also read the next question, which is connected to everyone. The question was asked for all the presenters. We have seen many case studies during the COVID-19 period. How did you, the academics, change your usual education methods for these studies? The question comes to all speakers.
I can try my hand at answering, or trying to answer at least.
By the way, thank you very much for the very inspiring presentation.
Well, thank you, Nurdan. That's very kind of you to say.
I've heard a lot from the SDG focal point about you and how much they liked your presentation.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. Just trying to help and contribute to the overall reflection. My first reaction to the questions is to say that I think we are all learning as we go along, and identifying the problems is part of the solution. Thank you, Ravi, for your presentation, because you ended with something I find that is very important, which is to ensure that students have sufficient Wi-Fi capacity in a space to be able to, mental space and physical space to be able to learn and concentrate, which are very fundamental aspects. But having identified them and taking the bull by the horns and asking the students of your group whether that is a possible thing is already part of the solution. Now, it doesn't mean that everything is resolved, but I think that making amends and trying to compensate inevitably becomes the next step for all of us. And I think teaching will require a lot more time in these pandemic times, and that is a reality we will see in the future, whether that is positive or negative. But as an academic, certainly research will suffer for the sake of teaching, and that is the nature of the beast, and we need to deal with that, but we assess as we go along. Somebody else might want to add something.
Christina, any opinions on the question?
Yeah, well, I have first to say I didn't want my student to be the speaker because it will look like a showcase of my course. So I asked for others, but at the end I put, because I really believe we need to involve the young people and the students, because has been, I think, so far too much one direction. And it's not just teaching, it's learning. What we have to make sure it works. Sometimes you have the perception maybe it works, but it's for them to say, no? But the thing is also, I'm a bit against the kind of immediate feedback we ask the students. A very good teacher I had said we have to ask them after 10 years. And I completely agree, because I used to be critical with some teachers that now I realize how good they were. So I think, you know, it's really important to hear to the students, and I try to hear, and I try to be, I think a key thing for this master course is flexibility. You have to really, every year you have a different audience, really, in a way, because it changes, really. It's quite international course, but it's also local. And you have to really set the baseline. They come from different countries, different courses, different background. And until they get to this level playing where you can start actually doing something more effective, takes a while. So that's my main worry now. How is we are going to set that in a screen? And I have done some before of groups that didn't met, and I have, you know, sometimes they actually, with, you know, the group dynamics can change depending on what it is, and if they don't know well each other, they can create conflicts, and emails could be misread. And so I think the face-to-face is very important for our humanity, I think. So it's a transformation of humanity in a way, of how, you know, we are asked to do something that will take years and years. We have to do it in a week. Well, we have to do it in a weekend, actually. Last time I saw students was on Friday, and then on Monday we couldn't see anymore. So really challenging, but I think resilience and also improvisation. That's why I put it in the title of my presentation. Because I think as academics and professionals in general, it's all about planning, and you have to be really well prepared. But actually to have skills to improvise, to be flexible, to be creative, I think that's so important. So how we teach that, that's no, you know, it's by practice, but it's also in terms of, I think, role model. And, you know, I try the students to be exposed. I think expose them to various situations and have presentations from day one. And I don't know, that they take, these are, you know, graduate students, and they're another level. They're really, I see them quite like peers as well. So they're all qualified architects or engineers or conservators. And I think you have to, in a way, be one more in the group. You are the one leading, but I think you need very much to see what the needs are. And as I say, it may change with years. With the lockdown, we have this extra level of difficulty of just not accessing, but we have to think. And in a way, I don't know if Ravi mentioned, but in the review, normally we will have 2 or 3 people from the council attending. We have 11 people. So we have like 6 from the council, 2 from History Scotland, another from WSP. So we have more than ever. And I think I try to be constructive with this terrible situation. And I think that's the things to bank on. I think we have to get the most of that, or like what we are doing right now. No, probably we'll be not doing this if the lockdown didn't happen. So I think it's all about, you know, it's change, it's continuous change, and making the most of what you have.
Okay. Claudio, do you have any opinions for the question? Actually, the next question is also very similar. I would like to ask it also. Mario Santana has asked, can we see strategies during lockdown?
Sorry, say that again, Jordan.
Can we see strategies during lockdown? What did we do during the lockdown? How did we implement the education courses, the content? How did we do it during the COVID process?
Claudio, do you want to say? I can talk forever. I don't know.
You're muted.
Oh, yeah, bro, you have to.
You are muted.
Sorry, just a moment. Yes, I appreciate a lot all the presentation because also they spoke about the point of view of students, which is very important for us. And I think that during the COVID experience, maybe sometimes the students also appreciated a lot the online teaching. Of course, face-to-face lessons and supervision are fundamental. It's not possible to avoid. But I find more concentration in students. Our contact was, I couldn't believe that it was more intense, more deep. Especially because all the contacts were more lasting for more time. So maybe this is an experience also for the future, I don't know. Or to mix face-to-face lessons and online supervision, or I don't know. Now in Italy, we're talking about a blended education, say blended teaching, which is not so clear till now, but I must say that there are many positive aspects in this experience. Of course, it's a case of resilience, so we try to resist to.
I think audio is gone.
That was, yeah, I think the connection has
Probably.
lost. Yeah, I don't know. Some people, because in the questions I see they are looking like for very specific, and I saw, Claudine, your issue about Miro. We have a whole group, working group at the university looking at all the things and the implications, and we think we have quite a robust, because it's a mixture between recording lectures, studio-based, how you do that in terms of collaboration. Are you back?
Claudio, would you like to add something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disconnected.
So it was a lack of a connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Carry on. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. No?
I don't know if other opinion about this blended or future of our lessons.
So I think we didn't change anything. So we carry on doing exactly, because we work with the learning outcomes, and this is what we have to do, and we are recognized by HBC. We have to comply certain things that we have to cover. But one thing that really is very close to my heart, and we couldn't do it, is the experience in the Lyme Center, in the Scottish Lyme Center, which is this great place. The students go for a full day and they get the theory and then the practice of doing. And I couldn't find a replacement for that. So I sent them the links and resources, but the experience of going there and practicing themselves is something that if someone in the screen has a solution for, I would like to hear. We found a solution actually for surveys, because there are some virtual reality doing with the total station, for example. So we found some with colleagues from civil engineering. We're finding solutions to replace the experience of setting up a total station. But for the Lyme mixing, we need a more, I don't know, different system. And what I'm doing is just passing that to the second semester now. Hopefully things will be better by then. But I think it's just rearranging a bit the course in those terms. And then also library resources, that librarians are key now to making more resources. Even the copyright issues have been relieved now, because they allow more photocopies, or considering this situation. So there is adaptation, and this is what I found. And for me, it's the fundamental, how collaborative has been, how helpful the people has been, how valuable. And down to people. I think people is what makes things work, and I think it's people's attitudes have been in some cases even changing for the best. And I think hopefully we keep that going, because I think it's fundamental.
I'm going on to the next question and comments, which comes from Mario Santana again. Is CIF finally submitting a revised principle? It will be good to have some guidelines for online teaching, site visits, fieldwork in this lockdown situation. Also, how to involve stakeholders to provide some level of access to students in heritage studies. Maybe we should work on that as CIF to improve the guidelines to compensate with the COVID situation in case it lasts longer.
Yeah, I think Nurdan as CIF, because Nurdan is the secretary in the new bureau. I think with the CIF we need to work on that as well, because of course there is already work revisiting the guidelines, but I think we need to consider this new world that we are at. We never thought we will be. I don't know if it's our new world or a new bad film, but I think it's something to take in account. I think it's in terms of, you know, giving a bit of guidance, because I think people is looking at the ICOMOS CIF for a bit of guidance of how they go about, and giving a bit more the criteria. And certainly I think with our combined experience, we put things together, but I think we want as more consultation as we can. And I think the main purpose of these webinars is that, so that people know, you know, a bit what we do. So you get to know us, but we want to know you as well. So I think just our emails will be available, and please get in touch anytime for, you know, suggestions. Or I don't know. We want to also collaborate and have other activities. If you have some good ideas for webinars about a particular theme, and not in an intended way, but we ended up having a bit of theme here with the 20th century and the industrial heritage, which I think is quite interesting. And we have the second coming webinar on the 11th of September. And they are going to discuss more. So what we will do is to collect these questions as well and give it to the speakers, to the second webinar as well, so that we can follow up as well in some of your questions, hopefully with more detail in terms of, you know, giving people a bit of ideas, how they can go about in their own courses or with their own practices.
The next one is a comment by Claudine Diom, I think answering my question. Documentation of sites are a challenge as access to library and archives is limited. More than ever, it is important to help students critically evaluate sources, because misinformation and fake news, etc., increased tremendously with COVID. Having students work together to gather information, plan for discussions about sources can also help, she said. Ege Yıldırım asked, should we prioritize maintaining pre-COVID methods as much as possible, or change teaching methods for a post-COVID world and be open to remote technology-based teaching, she asks. Should we continue with our traditional methods, or should we look for new technological methods? I think we will be talking about this in the second webinar, more or less.
Mm-hmm. And also I would like to hear Viravi's further comment on that as well.
Ravi, you're muted.
I think, I mean, to be honest, I would like to, the question asks about open to remote technology-based teaching, which might include site visits also, I guess. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. I would still want to visit sites. I really would, because in my first semester, I did see a lot of sites, and it really changes the way I learn, and it helped me in my second semester to design. So I think site visits, maybe only in that physical learning. I think practical training, for example, about the Line Center and visiting the site, I think we might still want to stick with it. So,
yeah, I definitely want to stick with all of it. I think for the students, it's always a highlight, no? The site visit, for all of us, you know, nobody wants to be sitting in a classroom just watching slides as we are doing it. I think we really love to go and see the buildings and meet the architects who work on it and the owners, and it's a really 160 degrees experience, no replacement for that really. So I'm looking forward to the next webinar where maybe people come with some ideas. For sure there are virtual tours and even some good ones of the architect who have done the conservation work, or the conservator, other professionals going to the building and explaining. And actually this could be good, because what I found in site visits, if you are with 20 students, the ones on the back, they will not hear the speaker telling about the building. So it could be good in certain aspects. But as I say, personally, I will move the practical activities to the second semester. I don't want to remove them, because I think it's fundamental.
Yes, I agree with Christina. It's impossible to avoid the direct contact. Someone told that the danger is not the contact with the building, but with too much people in a closed situation. So we have to return to the contact with the reality of the architecture. We can also use the new technologies in contacting archives or libraries that are really upgrading their way to get the disposition of their archives or books. But this is very important for our discipline. But the original way to touch the monument, to stay inside, to see the change of the light during the day, it cannot be replaced by nothing, I think.
Nurdan, can I add something to that, please?
Definitely, please.
Thank you. I completely agree that the tactile aspect of heritage is something that cannot be replaced by a photograph. And what I'm thinking about doing is as a compensation measure in a way, is trying to use that knowledge about materials of buildings and applying it to the students' reality. I'm thinking about international students, and it might be somewhere else than the site or the object of understudy or proposed in a studio. There's nothing preventing us from using the students' immediate environment and exploiting that as a site, for instance, and creating an opportunity for students to share the place where they have experienced the physicality of materials and share that with the others online. I think what we might have to get out of our idea of having one site for everybody, the same one for everybody, and perhaps expanding that notion to include sites, plural, that are more accessible for students where they are. And again, we're learning this as we're going through. It's trying to appreciate the forest when you're staring at the tree trunk. But I think that it's an opportunity for us to question everything that we are trying to accomplish and the goals, the outcomes of our courses. And thinking about what we're trying to achieve in terms of competencies allows us perhaps to open the issue and try to combine practice and make the most of the situation we find ourselves in currently. I'm sorry if this is a bit in a disarray, but what I'm trying to say is that we have perhaps to be more creative, as Christina suggested, and find ways to use the capacities that are available now with students. And I think on-site learning is one of them. Let's try to encourage each students to use their immediate environment to acquire those skills we're seeking to provide them with.
Thank you.
Sorry, Nurdan, because I'm reading a question someone is making that to me about if I found that the focus on material from the archives or extra reading created a noticeable shift in this thinking and work. And definitely yes, and the video I was showing you, this student was for some time without access to any electricity and what fun it was more thinking. So she had like times of thinking and times of doing, and this was quite good. So I was thinking about embedding that in the actual program, because normally I give them quite a regimented process of when they move from one activity to the other. So I think to leave them maybe away from technology for a while is a beneficial thing in terms of thinking, because especially these days that all draw with CAD or Revit, and they straight away they go into the computer and start doing, and they don't maybe read enough or revisit previous, is what I found in previous years, revisit previous lectures, or they kind of forgotten what you told them at the beginning of the year. So I think how we do that, but I think could be just a good suggestion to everyone to allow this kind of clear times, especially when they are doing the project, to reflect on the material. So I definitely see a difference, and still I'm working it out. And I have Ingval is attending as well, and he say about the setting, and he's so right, because we have a course as well about how to set your scene for. I'm not doing any of those things. I know all the theory, and it's very important when it comes now, because I take it like a more domestic thing, because I'm talking with colleagues, and it's not. But when we do the formal lecturing, we have to set, in a more formal way with the right light, with the window in front of you, and I think for all of you that are doing that, I'll suggest to go through one of these courses actually, because it's in our university, it's a course that a videographer does on how to, well, it's a filmmaker actually, he's a filmmaker, how to set the scene to not distract the student from what they are seeing. So important.
Thank you very much. We have so many questions, but I think Catriona wants to add something, and she's just very shortly, please, because we have too many questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, following on what some of you said in that suggestion by Claudine as well, I found myself after 80 hours of online teaching over the summer. So I run the MA in conservation in Birmingham City University. And although the students thought they were doing well online and we were doing a good job, I was very frustrated at what I saw them not getting and lacking. So as preparatory material, I sent them out to look at examples in their local area pertaining to the materials that we were going to be studying. And then they came back, and during the planned session, they had to present their photographs, 10, 15 minutes each, and we would all discuss that. So they were made to interrogate, and they were giving leading questions like, what do you not know? What can you not tell? So, and I found that really useful because they had to be much more engaged. And that's what I missed from the face-to-face class with them. So, we get better, but I for one can't hope this does not eliminate the building to person, the site to person interaction.
Hopefully. Thank you very much for your comment. I'm going to the next question. Does anyone have examples of internships or practicums, since the goals of these activities are hard to reach without direct supervision, such as exposure to a work environment, especially if the student is unknown to the supervisor? She is asking to everyone. Any experience on internships or practicums?
If no one else has, not myself, but a colleague who's a contributor to the course. He's an engineer in practice, and he has some internship that I couldn't really follow because it was really difficult, because it was someone had to shadow him. And of course, he's from home, working from home, doing the project, and it was just too difficult. So I think it's a real problem there that I think probably is one of the most difficult one to solve, when someone has to shadow someone to learn. To do that online there may be a way, but it's terribly complicated, I think.
Exactly. Going on to the next question to all the participants, probably from Yıldız Salman. In case the period of the pandemic lasts longer or other similar cases occur, do you have long-term projections? Do you think the pandemic will create a change in the paradigm of conservation education? This is also leading to the second webinar, I think. What's going to change after COVID?
Yes, leave them some. But
This is
yeah,
just advertisement for the second webinar.
I think the fact we are here, I think we are already changing something, because this will not happen a year ago, I think, to have this webinar. I think that's why we are all here. And I think people is quite open actually to change as well, because maybe we have been doing, and there are lots of pressure because, for example, in UK, there's going to be a lot of investment in new build. And I'm a bit worried that all is forgotten of existing, and so I go to various places to make the point, because I think, you know, if they are going to invest in construction, the first is to look at the existing and see, you know, what is good there and what can we make of it, and then look at the new. I think for you know, I don't need to sell it to any of you in the screen probably, but I think we need to sell individually to the world, and I think each of us has that duty to do, to go and really around your network and the people you can lobby. I think it's so important.
Exactly. A comment and a question from Yen Farquharson. Really pleased to hear a student's perspective who should be at the forefront of these discussions. Really interested to hear from the earlier speakers what feedback they have received from students, online teaching, online learning and teaching. What kind of reactions did you receive from your students?
Any of the others? Claudine?
Claudia, you're muted.
As I told before, the reaction was very positive. If I think to the final presentation of the thesis degree, they were very good presentation by the students, and the final evaluation was higher than normal because they were concentrated on their presentation. They were very close to the subject. So I think the general response from the students is okay. I don't know in the future, this is the problem, because, for instance, the works I talk about were started before the COVID, the pandemic. So I had the possibility to discuss and to see and to more or less organize the work. Now it starts to be difficult to work about something we didn't discuss. So going to the previous question, I don't know for the future, but right now it's okay, the response, the answer from the students. Thank you.
Now the difficult times arrive with the new semester without. The next question I think is already answered by Christina, but is also asked for Claudio, for the design studios. Have you used or are you planning to use special software to assist students for the design process, such as the exhibition platform Miro, for instance? Claudio, do you have any comments on that?
I don't know, Christina, I don't know what do you mean.
Yeah, I think we are considering all the Miro, and you know, we have to go in an order because time is also constrained. I'm supposed to be on holidays now. But you know, it's like starting with the minimum necessary and then building from there. So this is how we are doing it. I think is what I suggest to everyone to do. And I think recording the lectures, I make sure I will give them live. So our plan is we follow the government recommendations. We will start online for 2-3 weeks, and then we will go in the blended mode where we can have some activity. But I'm really planning the whole online for any eventuality, because lockdowns come and go. And yes, looking at other countries, what is going on, I think you have to do your risk assessment and be prepared. So to have the material, and we benefit, as Ravi said, that we have this My Place system that is really good because it's you put everything there. So the students can go there in their own time and finding all the materials of the lectures. Or in the library, we have now an interactive system as well. They can just click and see the electronic journal. So this is where technology is important. You need that to support anything you do. If this doesn't work, is when things fail, I think, and makes, I think, a stressful experience. I think if the technologies should be, as you know, invisible, just to all make it work, but without really having to think too much about it, and to have in place the systems that allows you to do what you need to do, I think is fundamental. So I think work on that as well. So I've been, for example, getting involved in the faculty level working group, that it wasn't really beyond my expertise, but just to hear firsthand what can I do and implementing it as soon as I can.
Okay, the next question comes from Pınar Aykaç. I was wondering whether students could have chance to virtually exchange ideas or information other than scheduled class meetings during lockdown. Did they meet without you? Did the students meet without the teachers?
Yes,
Ravi.
we did. We did. We have a group for ourselves. Our class is not too much in number, but I'm sure it would be possible with a bigger class too. And we already knew each other, so we did talk in the group. We scheduled a few meetings for ourselves to discuss how we can do this, and yeah,
So
it
this is
was
also
possible. It was possible, and it was also helpful. That's why I included it in my conclusion, that we kept talking to each other and helping each other with things.
so peer learning that Christina talked about has actually occurred even online.
Yes, it is possible even online.
Yeah, but the challenge I found, as I say, is the fact that these students were 6 months together, so they knew very well each other. Now the challenge is to have a group of students come from very different places. How you put them in a proper group is the thing that keeps me awake by
As soon as they face the problems, they will connect to each other, Christina, don't worry.
Yeah, but it's a different connection. That's the problem. I think we all experience that when you don't know people, and and we haven't actually with Nordan, we never met in person, so we met only through a screen, but we have seen each other a few times, and but it takes time. I think it takes more time online to get to know people that in person. But
A comment comes from Ege Yıldırım. There seems to be a true risk of dissociation from the physical place in education as well as other aspects of heritage. This is a comment, so I'm going on. A great offer from Mario Santana to everyone. Can we collaborate together to carry classes in autumn?
Don't offer. It's a big risk to offer. You will be bombarded with requests. I think
it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's something we already thought about, and it's all, it depends. For example, I pay the contributors, and if it's part of their job, we will not pay them. But if it's not, if they come as professional, and then when it's online, there will be a different arrangement. They have to provide passports, for example, bring the passport and we get the photocopy. I don't know, the whole system has to really change. We haven't worked that out yet. So I'm happily carry on with the existing speakers, adding maybe 1 or 2 more, if it's not too difficult. But I think there are challenges there in terms of, depends on the country and the university. And I think, but I think we should really try to exchange more, because for example, things I don't have, like landscape conservation, landscape, which is something I would love to have some of that. I don't know, there are certain expertise that maybe it's people away, and I don't know, we should try, but maybe within the framework of ICOMOS we can create some sort of platform to have a session or something. I think rather than doing individual in the university, maybe it's more difficult. If we have a platform where maybe a day, a month or something, we have a session where we can have different, I don't know, something to discuss. I think this is very useful, because I think we just take ideas and just for further discussion.
Nurdan, do we have more questions?
We have so many more questions.
Yeah,
Five more of them.
I think a lot of time, so maybe we should we limit?
I think we can just, because we can save the questions, and as I say, also we can identify the who is asking the questions. So if something needs to be sent to the actual person, we can do that, or we can carry it to the next session. Yeah.
Maybe more.
Unless it's anyone with a very urgent question that
Yes.
needs to be responded right now, we can.
Unfortunately, we have 35 more questions. So.
Oh dear, that's great.
Anyone with an
That's impossible.
People, the thing is, we set a time, and I'm not very keen.
We have another webinar for that.
Yeah, people will feel maybe that they don't want to leave.
Yeah,
No good manners, so we better close rather than they all leave us.
The same situation of our students, no longer supervisions.
Anyone with an urgent question that needs to be answered, please show yourself or give us a voice so that we can see you. Otherwise, we will have to close the session.
Yeah,
and keep the questions for the next webinar and be prepared to answer them maybe there. So I think nobody's question is that urgent.
Okay, so let's.
Some of them are repeats, okay.
This is a good demonstration that 2 hours on Zoom for classes is about the maximum we can all endure, right? So.
And without a break, that's not good practice, guys.
Exactly. So although I find this discussion.
A comfort break at an hour for sure, always.
So I leave the ground back to Ebru.
Yes, I think we have to create another strategy for that kind of webinars. It would be great to discuss longer about the questions and answers and some keywords maybe. But I think we have some definite keywords now, like the perception of cultural heritage, the nature of education and the nature of cultural assets, documentation, archives, access, sustainability. These are some keywords for further discussions, I assume. And like Claudio's examples, the nature of specific periods or architecture is also another part of it. And all the actors' opinions are very important, like Baryavi's very important presentation, and we would like to hear all the actors' opinions in different platforms. This is a start, and it should follow with many other webinars, I think. So this gives me the opportunity to invite you all to the following second webinar, which is scheduled on September 11th. The discussion focus is entitled as The Emerging New Paradigm in Conservation Education and the Power of Place. Is the replacement for site experience? So I'm sure it will be again a very inspiring and fruitful discussion like this one. And I want to thank to our panelists and participants who joined this webinar. And some special thanks to Cristina Gonzalez Longo, the president of CIF International, who organized the webinar with great effort and love. And also, of course, Nurdan Kuban, the Secretary General of CIF International, who also will host the second webinar. Thank you for the question and answer part also. And also a special thank to Aylin Akçabozan for designing the webinar posters. It was a great opportunity to meet you all. And we hope to see you in another platform. online or also hopefully somehow face-to-face in the
course.
future. So I would like to say goodbye to everybody, and maybe most important of all, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Ebru.
It was very
See you all
exciting.
soon.
Thank you.
So,
See you on the 11th.
Thank you, Ebru. Thank you, Christina and Claudine and Bayrani.